Okay, if you have Saturn in the third house, let me talk a little bit about the third house. So the third house is the house of communication. It's your lower mind. So it's the way that you think and the way that you express yourself kind of on the day-to-day. I also associate it with the internet, kind of your internet posting and your texting, just like quick, nothing that you would publish, which would be the ninth house. So it's the opposite of the ninth house. So it's all the other communication that isn't so well thought out. It's your day-to-day interactions, right? So if you have Saturn in the third house, you might have difficulty with your communication. So you might have, it's also the lower education, it's as opposed to the higher education. So you might have had like a learning disability or just difficulties with school. You might not have, but that's definitely a possibility. So during the time of your Saturn return, Saturn brings difficulty and restriction and limitations to any place of the chart where he is found. So let me just make sure this is still recording. Yes, it is. So Saturn brings limitation to anywhere in the chart where he is placed. Saturn is kind of like a cranky old man that judges you and kind of, even in the shop, that Saturn is an old man who kind of judges you, and he's like a cranky grandpa sort of character. And he brings restriction and seriousness to anywhere that he's placed. And for you, it is in that communication aspect. So throughout your life, you might have difficulty communicating, especially on the day-to-day with others. You might like not be very good at small talk, or you might hate small talk and you just feel kind of dumb at it. There's this word in Spanish, torpe. It's kind of like dumb. Yeah, you just feel dumb at small talk. So during your Saturn return, you might have issues with that. So I've put together some quotes that I hope will help you along your way. And let's just get into them. Okay, so here are some quotes that could help you if you're going through your Saturn return. Like I said, quotes are always something that give me a lot of peace, or give me something positive or something non-negative to focus on, so that I could kind of quiet the chatter that's in my mind. So I'm hoping these could help as sort of like guiding mantras along your Saturn return path. Saturn in the third house. So the first one is, it took me quite a long time to develop a voice, and now that I have it, I am not going to be silent. And Madeleine Albright said that. So when you have a Saturn in the third house, it could kind of make you be the type of person that doesn't speak up for yourself. You kind of don't want to ruffle people's feathers, maybe because you are afraid that you might say something wrong, or that others might misunderstand you, or that you might put your foot in your mouth. You just kind of generally don't really feel confident in speaking out. So by the time your Saturn return comes along, you have all this pent up resentment kind of, that you haven't really been able to express yourself, and you might explode, and this could lead to you having a lot of misunderstandings with people, and lead you to maybe misunderstand others, or other people might misunderstand you. Kind of a Mercury retrograde situation, but like times a million. You might post something that might be misconstrued, or that might be inappropriate. It would be one or the other. Like the result will be the same. You're gonna have issues with your communication with others, and this is gonna bring you some distress. So by that time, you might want to kind of learn to be sure of yourself in your speech and in your communication. And that also involves you kind of thinking about what it is that you want to say, because the things that you say, those are the things that you end up standing for. So by the time you're 30 years old and you have a Saturn in the third house, it might be useful for you to become more, not introspective, but kind of think about the things you want to say before you actually say them, so that when you do say something, it's something that you're proud of and that you could stand behind. Because it has taken you this long to develop your voice, and you don't want to shut it off. Like, you don't want to be silent. So make sure that what you're saying is important enough to actually say. The next quote is, Social media is the ultimate equalizer. It gives a voice and a platform to anyone willing to engage. Amy Jo Martin said that. And I think that's a really important thing for a Saturn in the third house person, because Saturn in the third house people, even though they have difficulty with that communication and that, I think the third house reminds me of social media because we use it so much, so often to like just communicate back and forth all the time. We do it pretty much all day in our society. So social media is a great platform for you to share your ideas. And when you're Saturn in the third house person, you might not be inclined to share your ideas. You're scared to put yourself out there like that. Your mental ability, your mental capacities, your words, you might be afraid to put them out there. But social media is a great place to put those things out there. So you should be willing to use your voice out there, and you shouldn't be afraid of doing that. But obviously that's after having cultivated that for some time. So Saturn return period is a great time to work on that. The next quote is, remember not only to say the right thing in the right place, but far more difficult still, to leave unsaid the wrong thing at the tempting moment. Benjamin Franklin said that. So with the third house Saturn return, it might, like I said, you might get into some hiccups with people, get into some misunderstandings. And it is a great time to think about the fact that it's not just about saying the right thing, but also learning to be silent. Because when you've had Saturn restricting that area of your life all your life, you might be tempted to just like, I'm sick of it. I'm gonna say my piece all the time now. And that might be a tempting thing, but you've been silent for so long, so it's understandable that you want to just express yourself. But that isn't always a good thing. Like, just, you don't always have to speak your mind. And I think as Americans, as third house people, you're kind of sick of it and you just want to unleash. But the wiser thing to do is to learn when to speak up and when to stay silent, because every time isn't the time to fight or to stand up. Not every time. Not everything is a battle. Some things are just not that important, and you have to pick your battles, sort of thing. So Saturn in the third house. Next one is, once you accept that we're all imperfect, it's the most liberating thing in the world. That you could go around making mistakes and saying the wrong thing and tripping over on the street and all that and not feel worried. Paloma Faith said that. And this reminded me of Saturn in the third house, because I feel that Saturn in the third house people, if they make that hiccup online or in a communication with somebody, they say something stupid and they get into something, they can kind of beat themselves up and just be like, oh my God, like this is like such a huge deal. And it's not. Like, everybody makes mistakes. So it's also about learning to just kind of just laugh things off and let things go and not let them become bigger than they have to be. Because you definitely can make things bigger than they have to be. We all can. So the Saturn return period is a time where we can do that to ourselves, make things bigger than they actually are. So it's a great time to just really analyze and consider just how big things are and how they don't have to be that big. We don't have to let them overtake our lives. So think about that. The last quote is, most misunderstandings in the world could be avoided if people would simply take the time to ask, what else could this mean? Shannon L. Alder said that. So yeah, it's another quote that has to do with misunderstanding. So what else could this mean? This reminds us, or kind of nudges us to remember that whenever we express something, or whenever somebody expresses something, it could be interpreted in so many different ways. And whenever we become offended by somebody, or we made somebody mad, there's a reason for it. It's coming from somewhere. And when we become more analytical, we would be better able to understand what it is that has upset the other person, or how we might have come off the wrong way. And it's a reminder to us to not be offended by other people, but also it's a reminder to us to analyze the things that we say that could be misconstrued by others. Because, like I said, a Saturn return for a third house Saturn person might be a time when that could happen. You could get into a lot of little arguments with people and kind of feel alienated from your day-to-day surroundings, which are your third house people, your friends, your siblings, people that you talk to on a day-to-day basis. You might feel alienated from them. So it's a great time to don't let little fights or little petty things become bigger than they have to be. Okay? So those were my quotes for you, Saturn in the third house, and I'll see you in the next video.